The bridge was narrow, one person wide, maybe two if they liked each other. Weathered planks laid over rope and iron, swaying gently above a river so wide Sabrina could hear it before she saw it. That low, constant rushing, like the earth itself exhaling. She adjusted the braided hemp strap of her satchel where it dug into her shoulder and took her first step onto the bridge. The island sat in the middle of the river like something out of an old tale. Stone chapel rising from a tangle of wild garden, its bell tower catching the last copper light of the afternoon. Lanterns already glowed in the trees, dozens of them, glass and iron, strung through branches that arched over gravel paths like cathedral ribs. A wedding. Marin's wedding, according to the letter that had found Sabrina 3 towns back, forwarded twice, the ink smudged from traveling through rain. Come, River Island Chapel, first Saturday after the solstice. I'm finally doing it. Sabrina hadn't seen Marin in over a year. Hadn't seen anyone from her old life in over a year, if she was honest. That was the point of being a traveling herbalist, the traveling part. You moved, you gathered. You mixed tinctures in rented rooms and sold them at market stalls, and you didn't stay long enough for anyone to start expecting things from you. But Marin had asked, and Sabrina had come. She reached the middle of the bridge and paused, one hand on the rope rail. The chapel's bell tower stood dark against a sky turning the color of bruised peaches. People moved on the grounds below. She could see them through the trees. Dozens of them. Maybe more. That seemed like a lot for Marin's wedding. She kept walking. The gravel path from the bridge wound through the wild garden. Lavender gone leggy, rosemary thick as hedgerows, jasmine climbing stone walls and spilling its sweetness into the warm evening air. Sabrina's herbalist instincts catalogued each one automatically. The lavender needed cutting back. The rosemary was exceptional. She rounded the final bend and stopped. The chapel courtyard was full. Not full the way a friend's small wedding would be full. Full the way a ceremony of state would be full. Rows of carved wooden chairs arranged in a wide crescent. Banners in deep green and hammered gold hanging from iron posts. Pack leaders seated in the front row, their formal cloaks unmistakable. Guards stationed at intervals, hands resting on sword pommels. And at the altar, a stone platform beneath a flowering arch, stood a man. Not a groom waiting for his bride, a king waiting for his mate. Sabrina's stomach dropped. She knew what this was. Every wolf in every territory knew what a mate selection rite looked like, even if they'd never attended one. The arch of braided branches, the ceremonial torches, the empty space beside the altar where candidates would stand. This was not Marin's wedding. She took a step backward. Her boot crunched on gravel, and the sound carried in the hush between the seated guests and the stone walls, sharp as a snapped branch. The man at the altar turned his head. Auburn hair, finger raked off his brow in a way that suggested he'd run his hands through it recently. Burnt amber eyes that caught the lantern light and held it. A deep wine silk shirt open at the collar, a dark sand suede vest fitted to broad shoulders, a bronze chain glinting at his throat. He wasn't dressed like a man performing a ritual. He was dressed like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Until he saw her. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, exactly. Something deeper. Recognition without memory. Certainty without reason. His chin lifted, his shoulders squared, and one corner of his mouth curved upward in a way that made Sabrina's pulse stutter. She took another step backward. Don't! His voice carried across the courtyard without effort. Low, warm, unhurried. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. Every head in the courtyard turned toward her. Sabrina froze. She was acutely aware of how she looked. travel-worn ivory tunic with its drawstring waist creased from days on the road, juniper green trousers muddied at the hems, boots that had walked through 3 counties. Her ink-black hair was swept behind her ears and hanging to her waist, tangled from the wind on the bridge. Her satchel was stuffed with dried yarrow and feverfew and a half-eaten bread roll. She looked like she'd wandered into the wrong story. She held up both hands. I'm at the wrong wedding. The man at the altar stepped down from the stone platform. Slowly, deliberately. His boots made no sound on the gravel as he walked toward her, and the assembled guests watched in stunned silence. He stopped 3 paces away. Close enough that she could see the bronze chain at his collar was actually a series of interlocking wolf sigils. A king's chain. Close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker, warmer. Close enough that when he smiled fully, she felt it in her sternum. "No," he said, quiet, certain. "You're exactly where you should be." His name was Beckett Halford, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, unmarried, unclaimed, and, as of 17 minutes ago, utterly uninterested in the 6 candidates who had been presented to him in the ceremonial courtyard of the River Island Chapel. Sabrina learned all of this in the space of about 90 seconds, most of it from the horrified whispers of the women seated in the front row. "I can't be here," she said, backing toward the garden path. I got the wrong island, the wrong chapel. I was looking for my friend's wedding, and There's only one island." Beckett hadn't moved from where he stood, hadn't taken a single step toward her since that initial approach. He just watched her with those burnt amber eyes, patient as stone. "And there's only one chapel." "Then I got the wrong river." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sabrina could feel their stares like sunlight through a lens. Concentrated, hot. "You're a wolf." He said it the way someone might observe that the sky was blue. Statement of fact, not question. "That doesn't mean—" "And you crossed the bridge during a selection rite." His head tilted slightly. "Do you know what that means?" She did. Every wolf knew. The bridge to a selection chapel was open only during the rite itself. Anyone who crossed it, anyone who set foot on the island, was considered a candidate by ancient law. "I didn't know the rite was happening. I thought this was a regular wedding." "It doesn't matter what you thought." This came from a woman in the front row. She rose from her carved chair like she'd been spring-loaded, and Sabrina got her first clear look at her. Tall, sharp-featured, dark walnut hair pinned back with obsidian pins that caught the torchlight. A garnet brocade gown with gold thread trim that probably cost more than Sabrina had earned in the past year. Her eyes were tarnished gold and currently narrowed to slits. "The law is the law," the woman continued, her voice carrying the brittle precision of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "She crossed during the rite. She's a candidate, and she can wait her turn like the rest of us." "Portia." Beckett's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It just arrived, the way a hand arrives on a shoulder, firm, final. "Sit down." Portia Grave did not sit down, but she stopped talking, which was apparently a significant concession. Beckett looked at Sabrina again. That half-smile was still there, buried in the corner of his mouth. "What's your name?" "Sabrina Kelwick." She said it without thinking, then immediately wished she hadn't. Names were currency. Names were hooks. You gave someone your name and they could pull you toward them with it. "Sabrina." He said it like he was tasting it, weighing it, finding it exactly right. "Will you stay for the evening? Just the evening. You can leave in the morning." "I don't. The bridge closes at sundown during a rite." His expression shifted. Not apologetic exactly, but something adjacent to it. Honest, at least. "You're on the island until dawn, whether you stay in the chapel or sleep in the garden." She looked over her shoulder. The bridge was still there, swaying gently. But even as she watched, two guards moved to the near posts and began rolling the lantern chains. Traditional, ceremonial. The bridge wasn't being removed, just symbolically closed. The lanterns that marked it as open during the rite extinguished one by one until the bridge sat dark against the darkening river. She was trapped on an island with an Alpha King who was looking at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. Her herbalist's brain cataloged the situation the way it cataloged plants. Identify, assess, determine if helpful or harmful. Alpha King, fated mate selection rite. Bond she could still feel humming faintly in her wrist where he'd touched her. An island she couldn't leave until dawn. Helpful or harmful. She genuinely didn't know. Fine. She crossed her arms over her satchel strap. Just the evening. The selection rite was suspended. That was the word the officiator used. Suspended. As if Sabrina's arrival had jammed a mechanism that could simply be unjammed once the inconvenience passed. The 6 original candidates were escorted to a candlelit reception in the chapel's side hall, where wine and food waited on long tables and whispered outrage simmered under polite conversation. Sabrina tried to leave 3 times in the first hour. The first time she made it to the garden before Beckett appeared beside her on the path, walking at her pace, saying nothing. Just present. She stopped walking. He stopped walking. She turned around, he followed. The second time she got as far as the bridge posts. The guards weren't blocking it. The closure was symbolic, not physical. But Beckett was there again, leaning against the stone pillar at the bridge's start. Arms crossed, that infuriating calm settled over him like a second skin. "You're free to go," he said. "I won't stop you." "Then why are you here?" "Because I want you to choose to stay. There's a difference." The third time, she didn't try to leave. She sat on a low stone wall at the edge of the wild garden and pulled her satchel into her lap and started sorting dried herbs because her hands needed something to do besides tremble. He sat beside her, not close, not touching. Just near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "You're an herbalist," he said, watching her fingers separate yarrow from chamomile. "Traveling herbalist? I don't stay anywhere." "Why not?" She almost laughed. "Because staying means people expect things from you, and then you disappoint them. And then you leave anyway, except it hurts more because they thought you'd be different." The silence that followed was so complete she could hear the river. "My mother was an herbalist," he said after a moment. His voice had changed, still warm, still low, but with something rawer underneath, like a door cracking open. "She used to say that people who work with roots understand anchoring better than anyone. They just don't always believe they deserve it." Sabrina's hands went still. She looked at him. Really looked, for the first time without the filter of panic or flight instinct. The lantern light caught the auburn in his hair, turning it to dark copper. His burnt amber eyes weren't watching her hands anymore. They were watching her face. And the expression in them was not the calculating assessment of a king choosing a political match. It was wonder. "I'm not—" she started. "Don't." He shook his head, just slightly. "Don't tell me what you're not. Tell me what you are." No one had ever asked her that. She swallowed hard. "Tired," she said quietly. "I'm tired." He nodded, said nothing. Let the truth sit between them without trying to fix it. And something inside her, something that had been clenched tight as a fist for longer than she could remember, loosened. Just slightly, just enough. The chapel's main hall was cleared for the evening meal. Long tables draped in linen, candles in iron holders, the smell of roasted root vegetables and fresh bread drifting from somewhere warm. Sabrina was seated at the high table because Beckett had placed her there, not with grand ceremony, not with announcement, Just a hand on the back of the chair beside his and a quiet, "Here." Portia Grieve was seated 4 places down, and her expression could have curdled milk. "You realize what he's doing," Portia said, leaning across the woman between them during a lull. Her tarnished gold eyes locked onto Sabrina's. "He's making a spectacle. You're a curiosity, a distraction. When the novelty wears off, he'll complete the rite and choose someone appropriate." Sabrina set down her bread. "I didn't ask to be here. And yet you haven't left." Portia's smile was a blade. "The bridge is symbolic, little herbalist. You could walk across it any time. You're staying because you want something." The worst part was that Portia wasn't entirely wrong. Sabrina pushed back from the table and walked outside. The courtyard was dark now, the ceremony torches extinguished, the only light coming from lanterns swaying in trees and the moon rising fat and pale over the river. She pressed her back against the chapel's stone wall and breathed. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps on gravel. Measured. Unhurried. "You don't have to keep following me," she said without opening her eyes. "I know." He stopped a few feet away. Portia said something. Portia said several things. All of them designed to make me feel exactly as small as I already feel. "You're not small." She opened her eyes. He was standing in a fall of moonlight, and the sight of him, the bronze chain catching silver light, the wine-dark silk shifting against his chest as he breathed, the way his hands hung loose at his sides as if he were deliberately keeping them open, unthreatening, made her breath catch. "She's right about one thing," Sabrina said. "I could have left. The bridge is right there." "Why didn't you?" The question hung between them like a held breath. "Because you asked me to stay." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And no one has ever asked me to stay." Beckett went very still, the kind of still that was the opposite of calm, charged, restrained, a held-back tide. Sabrina. Just her name, just the shape of it in his mouth. But the way he said it, reverent, rough, like a prayer that hurt, made her eyes sting. He took one step forward, then another. Close enough now that she could see the amber of his eyes had darkened, the pupils wide. "Can I show you something?" he asked. She nodded. He reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. His fingertips touched her wrist, just the inside of her wrist, where the pulse lived, and the world told. There was no other word for it. A single, deep, resonant tone, not heard so much as felt, like a bell struck at the base of her spine, the vibration rolling upward through her ribs, her throat, the bones of her skull. It was not loud. It was not sharp. It was immense, ancient, inevitable. The bell in the chapel tower did not ring. But Sabrina heard one anyway, felt one. And when she looked at Beckett's face, she saw the shock of recognition in his eyes that told her he'd felt it too. "That's," she breathed. "The bond." His voice was hoarse. "I felt it the moment you stepped off the bridge. But I needed you to feel it too." His fingers were still on her wrist. She could feel his pulse through his fingertips, and it matched hers. Rapid, skipping, alive. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't stay. I've never stayed." "Then don't think about staying." His thumb traced a slow circle over her pulse point, and the toll sounded again. Softer now, a resonance rather than a strike, like the echo of a bell that was still ringing somewhere deep inside her. "Think about right now. This wall, this garden, me." She looked at him, moonlight on auburn hair, amber eyes holding hers with an intensity that felt like gravity. "Okay," she said, "right now." They talked until the moon was directly overhead. He told her about the selection rite, how he'd sat through it every year for 3 years, meeting candidates chosen for political advantage, finding none of them wrong but none of them right. How each year the pressure mounted, how the council presented dossiers, lineage charts, political alliances, trade advantages, as if choosing a mate were the same as choosing a supply route. "They gave you dossiers," she repeated, incredulous. "Bound in leather." His expression was dry, color-coded by territory. She didn't know whether to laugh or wince. She chose something in between. He told her how Portia's family, the Greaves, had invested heavily in her candidacy, not just politically, but financially, funding border expansions and trade negotiations with the unspoken understanding that the king's gratitude would manifest as a proposal. How the weight of that expectation sat on his shoulders like chainmail he couldn't remove. She told him about the road, about the years of moving, village to village, market to market, mixing remedies in borrowed kitchens and sleeping in haylofts, about the way loneliness had a taste, metallic and flat, like water from a copper cup left out too long. About how she'd told herself that freedom and loneliness were the same thing and had believed it for so long that the belief had calcified into something she mistook for identity. "They're not," he said. "I'm starting to figure that out." They were sitting in the wild garden now, on a stone bench beneath a jasmine-covered archway. Their knees were almost touching. Every time they accidentally brushed, her elbow against his arm, his shoulder shifting against hers, the toll resonated softer each time, like a bell learning to hum instead of strike. "Your mother," Sabrina said. "The herbalist. Did she teach you?" He smiled, and it was the first unguarded smile she'd seen from him. Not amused, not strategic, just warm. "She taught me to identify every wildflower in the Northern Territories by scent. I can't mix a tincture to save my life, but I can tell you what's growing within 50 yards with my eyes closed." He took a breath, drew in the garden air. Jasmine, lavender, needs cutting, rosemary, healthy stalk, wild thyme in the wall cracks, and his eyes opened, finding hers. "Yarrow and chamomile, in your satchel, and something underneath that. Feverfew?" She stared at him. "How? Good nose." He tapped the side of it. "Wolf thing." She laughed, actually laughed, a real one, unstoppable, spilling out of her before she could catch it. And his expression when he heard it, the way his eyes softened, the way his breath caught, the way he looked at her like she'd given him something rare and precious, made her chest ache. "You should do that more," he said quietly. "Laugh? Stay." The word landed between them. She felt it in her throat. Portia found them at dawn. The chapel courtyard was still, the guests sleeping in the side halls, the guards dozing at their posts. Sabrina had fallen asleep on the garden bench with her satchel as a pillow and Beckett's vest draped over her shoulders. He'd placed it there sometime in the small hours when the air turned cold, and she'd woken just enough to pull it tighter and inhale cedar and warmth and the faintest bell-tone hum against her skin. "This is absurd." Portia's voice shattered the dawn quiet like a stone through glass. She stood at the garden entrance in her garnet gown, obsidian hairpins catching the first gray light, her face set in fury that had been sharpened by a sleepless night. Beckett was on his feet before Sabrina fully woke. He stood between them, not aggressive, not threatening, just there, a wall of calm certainty. "She's a vagrant," Portia said, her voice rising. "A nobody with a bag of weeds. My family has supported this territory for 3 generations. We built the trade roads. We funded the border patrols. And you're going to humiliate us for a woman who wandered in off a bridge?" Portia. "No." Portia stepped forward, and her tarnished gold eyes blazed. "You owe us. The Greaves made your reign possible. You think you can just stop?" The word didn't come from Beckett. It came from Sabrina. She was standing now, his vest still around her shoulders, her ink-black hair tangled with sleep and jasmine petals, her smoke violet eyes clear and steady in a way they hadn't been 12 hours ago. "You want to talk about what he owes?" Sabrina said. "Fine. Let's talk about it. Your family invested in a territory and expected a king in return. That's not loyalty, Portia. That's a transaction. And he is not currency." The silence that followed was absolute. Behind them, guests were gathering at the chapel doors, drawn by the voices. Sabrina could feel their eyes. She didn't care. Something had cracked open inside her, something that had been sealed shut by years of making herself small, invisible, convenient. And what was pouring out of it was not fear. It was fury. Clean, bright, clarifying fury. Portia's mouth opened, closed. "I didn't ask to be here," Sabrina continued, and her voice was shaking, but it didn't break. "I walked onto this island by accident, but I'm standing here right now by choice. And if you think you can make me feel small enough to leave, you should know. I've been making myself small for years. I'm very good at it. And I'm done." Beckett hadn't moved. He was standing slightly behind her now. She'd stepped in front of him, she realized. Stepped between him and Portia. Put herself in the space where his shield should be. She felt his hand find hers, fingers interlocking. The toll, deep, resonant, unmistakable. Rolled through them both. And this time it was loud enough that Portia heard it too. Her eyes widened. You're bonded." Beckett's voice was rough, not with anger, with something else entirely. He stepped forward until he was beside Sabrina, their joined hands between them. "The bond manifested the moment she set foot on this island, and I have spent every moment since then trying to earn the right to tell you all what I'm about to tell you." He lifted their joined hands, turned to face the courtyard, where guests were emerging from the chapel doors, drawn by voices, blinking in the dawn light. "This woman," he said, and his voice carried the way it had when he'd first spoken to her. Effortless, certain, a voice that didn't need volume because it had weight. "This woman crossed my bridge and walked into my life, and she has no idea how extraordinary she is. But I do." Sabrina's breath caught. "The selection rite is ended," he continued. "I've made my choice. Not because ancient law put her on this island, because she stayed. Because she told me the truth about herself when it was easier to run. Because she is brave and tired and kind, and she smells like yarrow, and she laughed in my garden, and I am never going to recover from it." Tears. She was crying. She could feel them, hot and steady, rolling down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away because her hands were full, one holding his, the other pressed against her own chest where the toll was resonating so deeply it felt like her heartbeat had been replaced by a bell. He turned to her, those burnt amber eyes, that impossible warmth. "You don't have to stay forever," he said softly, only for her, even though everyone could hear. "You just have to stay right now, and then we figure out the next right now, and the one after that." She pulled him down by the bronze chain at his collar and intended to kiss him. He beat her to it. His mouth met hers in the first true light of morning, and the toll that rolled through them was not a single strike, but a cascade. A peal, like a chapel bell ringing and ringing, not in the tower above them, but in the space between their ribs, in the joined heat of their hands, in the sound she made against his lips, that was half laugh, half sob, entirely surrender. When they broke apart, the courtyard was silent. Then, from the back row, from a grizzled pack elder who'd probably seen 50 selection rites, a single, firm clap. Then another. Then the whole courtyard, clapping not with the polished rhythm of ceremony, but with the ragged, honest applause of people who'd just watched something real. Portia stood at the garden entrance, her garnet gown catching the sunrise. Her expression was unreadable. Then she turned, walked through the garden, and disappeared down the gravel path toward the bridge. Sabrina watched her go. Then she looked up at Beckett, who was looking at her with an expression that made her chest cavity feel too small for everything inside it. "I laughed in your garden," she said, her voice wrecked. "That's what did it? That's what did it." His thumb traced her cheekbone, catching a tear. Everything before that was certainty. The laugh was when it became unbearable. She pressed her forehead against his collarbone and breathed him in. Cedar and warmth and wild time and something that was just him, just Beckett, and the toll hummed low and constant in her bones like a lullaby. 3 months later. The wild garden on the river island was unrecognizable. Not because it had been tamed, Sabrina wouldn't allow that, but because it had been tended.